All right, we have Vania King back on the show. For those of you who did not listen to the first episode, I highly recommend that. But we're going to pick up where we left off last time with strategy. So last time, Vanya, we didn't get to talk a lot about strategy. We did touch on your career a lot, which was a great conversation. But at the end of the conversation last time, you were talking about how only pretty much only the WTA top 50. I think that was the ranking you settled on. Uh, Outside of that, everyone only hits cross court, and you figured out once you were coming back to a challenger tournament after you had had some time off that you were just going to poach or cross every single time, and that worked out well. So refresh people's memory with that tactic, why it works so well. And then I've got some follow-up questions for you as well.
Sure. So obviously not, it's not a concrete line, but
Sure.
there's definitely a threshold, at least in my personal experience, playing
Hmm.
juniors and the challengers and then going up to the WTA level, um, where I had talked a little bit about one of my most influential coaches, Ray Ruffles.
Hmm.
And so he was the one who actually taught me pretty much all the strategy that I know in terms of doubles.
Okay.
And for him, it was a matter of statistics. So he said, you're trying to figure out your opponent's patterns, and then there's other ways. That's another question about, kind of what's the best way to scout your opponent. But
Hmm.
so basically, most likely the average player plays cross court, right? Because it's high percentage shot. You're trying to get your partner involved. So
Right.
know that if, let's say, my partner's at the baseline and I'm at the net, let's say 75% of the time they go cross court. And my
Hmm.
job is to try to intercept the ball, right? Because if I'm closer to the net, then I have better leverage on the ball. It's a much more aggressive shot. So it would be actually a safe bet for me, given that my goal is to get that ball and to intercept. It would be safer for me to cross every single time, knowing that my opponent is going cross court 75% of the time. So even if they went down the line, chances are that I'm still winning most of those shots. So, and then even if we take like, okay, I might miss, let's say, even one out of three volleys, but two out of three
Hmm.
I win, I'm still up percentage wise. And then also, let's say my opponent, they might hit four balls cross court, or sorry, 75% of the balls cross court. But then
Hmm.
because I'm poaching, I'm now intimidating them and they'll probably miss one or two, they might miss 10 to
Right.
20% of balls because I've been putting a lot of pressure on them. So, it doesn't work if you don't have good volleys.
Yeah.
So, gotta improve your volleys to a point where you feel comfortable um, crossing. And that means, working on reaction, also working on court positioning, that you're cutting the ball off at an angle. So you're
Hmm.
really close to the net. But you're in such a strong position that even if you don't hit it perfectly, like you've seen players in big matches, and they cross and they might just tag it at the very end of the racket, but that
Yeah.
net person across from them is running away because or flinching, and then
Yeah.
they the point. So yeah, at the end of the day, it comes down to statistics. And um normally I go into a match thinking that my opponent will be playing high percentage shots, because that's what we're taught,
Hmm.
especially if we're not playing well. And the better you get, the more that you're thinking that they're thinking that you're gonna, so you're
Yeah.
trying to combat. um in the beginning, you're just combating um what they're doing, which is normally
Hmm.
just traditional conservative shots. And then as you go up, then you are trying to um push further than that. You're thinking, two, three steps down the line. And so that's why you might see players going down the line. That's why you see them lobbing, changing it up. And importantly, under pressure, and the personal experience only. So I don't know statistically, but I think the stats would agree with my personal experience is that most players are conservative under pressure.
Yeah.
So and that's a very normal reaction, as we want to protect our lead, or we want to protect our wins. And so
Right.
if you know that, you can also combat not only, let's say, what your opponent would more likely do, which is to play conservatively, but also to tell yourself, okay, my gut instinct, because I've got a little bit of fear, I'm trying to protect or hold and I really want to win. But then you can also talk through it to yourself and say, okay, actually that's not
The best strategy. Yeah.
strategy. Yeah, because my goal here is to intercept. So yeah, I mean, I
Yeah.
again was taught that by Ray. Um and there's of course skill and teamwork and personality involved with all of that. But yes, I definitely found anything below the WTA level, it was a little odd to me that players still played very, very conservatively, and they didn't play. Um, they played themselves. They played the way that they wanted to play versus playing, the circumstances and their opponents.
Right. And as a team. Yeah, I wanted to, so I want to ask about the scouting and then the volleys, but first I want to dive a little more into kind of the psychological aspect of this because it's something I've talked a lot about, and I love hearing other people's opinion because they'll tend to phrase it differently or think about it differently than me. But how much of this do you feel like is psychological and kind of fear-based? Because when I watch people um, play at the club level and even some pro matches at Indian Wells last week when I was there watching live, it would be like one team would cross a lot earlier typically, and the other team just kept getting beat on it and wouldn't cross, and
Yeah.
the team that crossed more would win. So how much of it is like, oh, but that point 2 games ago, I missed that volley. I don't want to do that again, versus maybe something else. How do you think about the kind of mental aspect?
So I guess you could say that it's and a commitment is 100% mental, but there's many things that might impact someone's decisions.
Hmm.
So if I don't practice doubles, if I don't practice, not even practicing doubles, if I don't practice being aggressive, being in the right position, I'm not encouraged to do that on a consistent basis, then of course I'm going to be scared to do it because I don't have any confidence in myself doing it.
Hmm.
So there's that
Okay.
element where you just like you need to have the right guidance. And if you're not going to, it's very difficult for a player to go out and do something that's unknown by
Hmm.
themselves and then feel confident enough to continuously do that. So usually having, a teammate or a coach that encourages that behavior is very
Hmm.
helpful. Because at the end of the day, you're looking at long-term, well, you know, I'm speaking about long-term growth. So
Right.
I think we touched on this last time. I also recognize like when you're playing at a recreational level, you have to gauge how much bandwidth you have to practice too. So
Yeah.
uh, so that aside, but let's say, unfettered growth,
Hmm.
um, you do need to put the work in. And like one of my other favorite coaches, Tariq Benabilas, he always told me, if you put the work in, the results will come. And
Hmm.
I truly believed like if you put the right work in, the results will come and you can just trust the amount of work that you put in.
Hmm.
Um, I mean, it's in some situations as well, like for example, if you've watched the first round matches versus matches throughout the tournament, there's always an increased element of unknown. So it's also getting a feel of your game and trying to process through it all. So you're trying to get to a state where you're rational, you're still in it, like you're still passionate about what you're doing and you're intense and you have focus and the adrenaline is there,
Hmm.
but it's not like you still have to have some of the logical side, whereas a lot of people when you get overwhelmed by the circumstances then we become very emotional. And
Hmm.
so that is a fine line to try to capture, and every time you go out on the court it might be different. So especially
Yeah.
when you, for us playing tournaments, like the first rounds are always the most mentally difficult because there's a lot of variables that we don't know. You know, we're still not used to the courts. We're not used to the courts in this pressured situation. We don't have confidence of wins behind our belt, you know, at that tournament. So as you win more matches, you'll see players become more settled and be able to become more rational on the court. But the goal is to find that level where you're still focused, you still have intensity, but you're able to still process things in a somewhat detached manner, because every time that you're playing a shot, that you're doing things, you have to be noting, okay, this is what I'm doing. You know, you're not just blindly hitting. There's always a purpose to everything. And then if it worked, great. And you're
Hmm.
telling yourself, okay, that worked, and why did that work? And if it didn't work, you know, whether it's because you made an error, then you're assessing, why did I make that error? Was that intention right? Or if you made a play, you know, if that didn't work, like continuously, especially in doubles, like you're continuously assessing, because it's much more strategic. You've got four people on the court, you know, you're not just typically overpowering like sometimes you see in singles. So
Right.
yeah, there's at least that's how I play. There's a lot of thought process involved, and I enjoyed that. I enjoyed the adaptation that happened in doubles. So sometimes even like if one play worked the whole time, okay, like I really wanted to win, so I was going to do that.
Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
fun to be challenged, you know, you're trying this play, and then after a couple of shots slash games, then your opponent adapts. Like if the better they are, they'll adapt, and then you'll have to adapt. And it's just this constant like cat and mouse, who's
Yeah.
gonna,
That's
yeah,
what makes it
come
so
out on
fun.
top.
So let's come up with real quick. So let's say there's like a 3-5-4-0 player who's listening. They are not the type of person who typically crosses. They usually play conservative and play everything cross court, but so does everyone else in their league, right? And they're listening to this and they're saying, okay, I want to get better at this crossing thing that Vanya's talking about. How can I build my confidence? Like what is, give me like a 3-month roadmap, including, you know, what should I do in drills? What should I do in my next match? Let's kind of summarize it for them.
So, caveat, I mean, I'm talking about myself and when I played, and there is definitely a physical slash athletic component to being able,
Sure.
like the more athletic you are, the more you can do on court. So I also
Right.
recognize that the average recreational player is not, you know, a professional
Yeah.
athlete
If
physically.
you've lost
So
some
there's,
agility, yeah, it's going to be a
yes.
little more difficult. Yeah.
So if you are, let's say, not as athletic to do certain things, that means you're going to have to weigh taking a bigger
Hmm.
risk. You might have to move earlier, open up space. You might have to be more strategic with your partner. So if you're doing things that you need to really communicate with your partner that, hey, I'm going to cross, but you need to cross behind me because I'm leaving this really open because I got to go really early.
Yeah.
And there's also, I think, at the recreational level, if you go like below 4.0 at least, I've seen a lot of lobs. And
Right.
so
Yeah.
that is, so there's
There's a
I would
lot to
say that
consider. Yeah.
more physical elements involved to that level than as pros, because you know the physical level is pretty much standard, and then it's more strategy.
Hmm.
That being said, so I would say, yeah, combating the lob is really important, but knowing patterns of those lobs too. Like, for example, if someone lobs, so a lot of times you might come forward, let's say whether it's a return or off of ground stroke, you're hitting cross court, you're coming forward, transitioning to the net. A lot of times when recreational players move back, they lob.
Hmm.
Um, they usually lob cross court. So, or let's say that I'm lobbing off of a return down the line. So my opponents now have to cross, because that person that the baseline has to cross over to retrieve my lob. Most likely they're going to lob cross court. Um, so in terms of like 3-month training. I would say you probably need to play at least 3 to 4 times a week, because I think twice is just maintaining.
Okay.
I'd spend half of your time training doing drills. So, and then half of that doing live drills, and then half of it doing dead drills. And when I
Okay.
say live, that means like you're rallying, you're setting up drills with a partner, and you're
Hmm.
playing back and forth. So the
Okay.
balls
So it's like point play. Yeah.
uh yeah, not necessarily. I mean, rallying is also live. So you could be going cross court, and that's also live. It's just that you don't know exactly where the ball is going. And then dead is when someone's feeding you, like tossing a ball by hand or feeding you a ball, and you know exactly where it's going.
Okay.
Um, and
So
there's,
25% of each of those. Sorry, I just want to make sure I'm understanding
I
it.
mean, like, it's not a perfect science, but I'd say that most recreational players, like, it's fun to go out and play points, right? And you just go out and you
Yeah.
rally up real fast and then you play points. But
Hmm.
it's very hard to build if you're not actually breaking things down. And so the
Yeah.
smallest building block is when someone is hand tossing you a ball, 3 feet away from you, and you were literally set in a position and working on a shot. So like
Hmm.
that's like the smallest building block. Like the closer you are, the slower the ball is, then the more you know exactly where it is and the less movement that you have. That's like the easiest to start building skills. And then
Hmm.
that transitions into, the person tossing the ball a little farther away from you. You might start, like, then you add a split step and then you transition into that shot. You might then add some movement into it. Then, that person who's feeding you goes further and further away to the point where they're feeding with the racket and they're across the net. But these building blocks are really important, because if you jump steps and you're
Yeah.
doing skills that you can't actually perform at that time, there's actually no point of doing that. So, because
Yeah.
you're not building anything, you're just doing something that's too difficult for you.
Hmm.
And so I would say in the beginning, I mean, if you have a 3-month training period and you're trying to build things, I would say, maybe even drill for a week and then go back into match play. Or, for a pro player, if you're like trying to change a technique, you would be
Hmm.
probably drilling for a month before you go
Hmm.
into match play, or maybe 3 months. So the longer you have to build those skills without putting yourself into that live point situation, because again, it's just step by step
Hmm.
trying to build, like, there's a
Like a new habit.
no there's so yes, um in exercise science, there's, like, in sports psychology, it's like, I think it's like conscious and um aware. There's like a spectrum, but basically when you're trying to build skills, you're conscious about it, you're conscious that you're trying to build that, and you're constantly thinking about it. So
Oh, I've
you
seen
want to get
this.
to
Yeah,
the
yeah.
point where, yeah, you want to get to the point where you're unconscious and unaware,
Right,
right? And
right, right.
so but it takes time, and that uh development takes, I think, statistically, like 3 to 6 months for the average person.
Okay.
So, it depends on how difficult the skills you're trying to accomplish. But I mean, if we're talking about just court positioning, I mean, that's fairly easy. I think something that recreational players do quite a lot is that they usually protect the alley, which,
Hmm.
again, if we're talking about our goal is to try to cross, your goal is to be as close to the middle as possible. I mean, it's counterintuitive to what a lot of people are taught with the string.
Hmm.
Follow, if the ball goes left, you go left. But that to me is a singles drill where you're following the ball to the left. But in doubles, so your partner would be doing that, but you are not. Like, you at the net person are trying to intercept, so you have a different goal.
Right.
So you're doing the opposite of that. And I find that a lot of recreational players over protect the line. Like, if they stopped and they took a step and stretched out their racket towards the alley, the racket would either cross the line or be very close to the doubles line, which
Yeah.
now you're basically protecting an almost impossible shot from your opponent.
Yeah.
most of the shots are going to go through the middle or cross court.
And
So
leaving like 80% of the court for your partner.
yeah, so I would say like if you're at the net in doubles and you've got this, you're in the singles service box, right? I would suggest practicing like if you bisect it vertically, I mean also horizontally, but vertically, like you don't go past that middle line of the singles box that's
Mhm.
closer to the alley. Um, because if you took a step over, even myself who was small and don't have a lot of reach, if I take a step over, I will at least get to the singles line. So I'm basically saying, okay, I'm going to give you the doubles line, but this also puts me in a better position where if I take one step to the right, my racket is in the middle of the court.
Yeah.
So I don't think that was very helpful, but
No, no,
give
no.
a position. But yeah, I think, but it's really taking the time to build those skills,
Mhm.
getting the guidance from a coach or a teammate, like, you might take some lessons and then building a plan of saying, okay, for the first X amount of weeks, we're going to practice together because obviously most players at the
Mhm.
recreational level don't have practice partners and coaches and hitting partners. So working together with teammates or practice partners that can work with you, and usually people have different skills that they're trying to develop, so you can help each other develop those skills.
Yeah. What's an example of one of the drills you would recommend? So you were talking about dead ball and live ball drills. What do those drills look like? Is the coach feeding from the baseline and you're just practicing kind of crossing and hitting your volleys, or
Yeah, I
something
mean,
else?
a basic one is just the coach like, so you're at the net, the your practice partner, the coach, is across from you at the baseline, and they're
Hmm.
feeding um, through the middle or cross
Hmm.
court. You
Okay.
just, you split step forward and you cross, and you just literally get used to, from a behavioral standpoint, crossing, move your
Yeah.
body, go that direction. Um, so I would say in terms of timing, usually like when your opponent, not when they take their racket back because they can still see you from the side of from the corner of their eyes, but as their
Hmm.
racket drops forward, that's the ideal time to move. I mean, that's
Hmm.
a very, I would say, traditional um, explanation of it, because as someone's now dropping their racket, there's no way that they can see you. They have to be fully watching the ball, fully focused on that. So
Hmm.
that's an easy way to describe timing. As you get better, and if the ball, let's say your opponent is playing really well and the ball's coming really fast, like you might have to take a risk that as they even just take the racket back, or you think they're not going to go down the line, like they hate going down the line or they haven't proved that to me,
Yeah.
so I'm going to totally expose that and take a risk here. So there's different things that you have to weigh, but yeah, traditionally that's the timing. So for example, if your coach is feeding you or your partner's feeding you, as they toss the ball up, and then as the racket goes forward, that's when you're moving across.
Okay. Got it. So then as people start to develop these skills with the drills, then it's time to implement it into the match play, which comes a little bit later. And that's where you were talking about the kind of unconscious, I don't know. I'll look up the terminology and put it in the show notes.
Yeah, I
But
don't know if I had it correct, but
yeah, I know what
yeah.
you're talking about though. It's from like a book or a psychological study or something like that. I don't remember. Um, but anyways, yeah, eventually it becomes just natural unconscious habit that you can implement into a match. Um, so you also mentioned scouting earlier. What is the best way to scout an opponent, or how did you scout an opponent? Let's say like you were already into the semifinals and there was a quarterfinal match in the afternoon that you got to watch. How would you go about scouting the opponent?
So ideally you watch them in their most recent match. So yeah, if I was playing in a semifinal match and if I had a chance to watch them in their quarters, like, I finished early, then it would be good to go just watch a couple of games.
Hmm.
Um, if you don't have that option, um, trying to find footage
Hmm.
of them playing, and the most recent ones, and also on the same surface. Um, and then if you don't have that option, like, when I was in juniors or at the recreational level, there may not be footage out there on YouTube or
Yeah.
something.
Yeah.
um, Talking to people about, if they've played against them, what are their strengths and weaknesses, I would say. Um, Things that I find interesting are, okay, which is their stronger side. Um, a lot of times players have a stronger side when they're aggressive, but it's weaker on defense. So usually I find like forehands are stronger. Players have
Right.
strong, they're aggressive, but weaker on defense. So it's things that matter in doubles, right? Like if your partner hits a strong return to their forehand and they're on defense, you might be interested to poach. But if they have a lot of time they're setting up, you're like, okay, I might wait a little bit.
Hmm.
Which side is weaker? Also, can they hit all directions? Like, do they prefer to only hit cross court? Can they hit down the line? What are the things that they do under pressure? What kind of serves do they hit? Especially the second serve. Is it a flat serve? Sorry, is it a slice serve or a kick serve? Generally players play conservatively on the second serve, so they'll probably hit to the same spot each time. On the first
Hmm.
serve, it's a little variable. At the net, are they aggressive at the net? Do they like to move? Do they like to stay under pressure? Or do they know what they're doing at the net? Are they in the right position? Have they
Hmm.
played enough doubles um, to do the right things at the right moments? Um, are there, we like to go a little further, is their forehand volley or their backhand volley worse? And so if they have a one hand backhand volley, I found usually that there's a strength issue for girls.
Hmm.
So let's say if I had a choice, if I didn't know better and they had a one hand backhand volley, I might pound that first, because
Yeah.
like you're trying to get as much information as possible that when you go in there, you have a game plan. You're gonna still
Hmm.
adapt it if it's
Yeah.
not working. If it's working, great, but you don't want to go in there without a plan. So
Right.
based on like I'm playing you, Will, I've decided that okay, you've got a good forehand. So when I'm serving, I'm going to start serving your backhand. Like I don't think you're going to poach as much. I mean, actually, because I love to go down the line, didn't really matter to me. But I may not feel as much pressure to go down the line versus someone that does poach a lot. I
Hmm.
usually like to decide between the two opponents, if they were both back, who was I going to play to? If they were both at the net, who was I going to play to start with?
Hmm.
Who
Yeah.
had better overhead? So I think I just gave too much information, like, because it's a lot to process. So I'd say, strengths and weaknesses of their game. Like
Hmm.
if we're playing to somebody, which side would you play to? Are they able to play both down the line and cross court? Because that's really important at the net. If you're being aggressive, there's a lot of players that in singles, if they see the court open, they play great and they can hit anywhere. But under pressure,
Hmm.
they can't do that. And because doubles is a different type of pressure, they may not like to go down the line.
Yeah.
Yeah. How is their serve? What spots do they prefer on their serve? And then as a team, who's better at the net and then who's better at the baseline? So if you want to pick apart someone, you start picking apart that person. So I guess
Yeah.
those are the main
I
points.
think, yeah, those are all really good ones. I think my favorites are the last ones. So as a team, like which one's weaker at the net versus the baseline. So that way, especially if you and your partner can get on the same page with when they're both at the net, you know which person your partner is going at, and you can adjust your position accordingly. Um, and then another one that I like a lot is can they go both directions with like each stroke? So at the club level, I don't think this is true at the pro level as much, but at the club level, I find right-handed players in the ad court can hit their backhand cross court no problem. But if you poach early on a slightly defensive or neutral backhand, they have trouble sometimes redirecting that down the line. So you can force a lot of errors or intercept the ball a lot in that
Yeah.
case.
Because on the backhand side, a lot of them have two hands. And
Hmm.
it's much more difficult because it's you're more stuck with the two hands. It's more solid and it's stronger.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but it is harder to redirect because you are now trapped with two hands versus, let's
Yeah.
say, with forehand, you've got more space with your elbow being open, you're not stuck with this other hand. And then you might be able to even like let the ball come later because you have one hand, you're freer. So
Right.
there's a little variability there.
Yeah.
I did
Yeah, that
also
makes
want to,
sense.
yeah, scouting, it's very important to know what people do under pressure. So if
Mm-hmm.
you have a chance, like I wasn't so interested in what's going to happen in the first four games of the match, but I'm curious, okay, it's 3-4 break point, it's set point. Where are they going to hit now? Because that'll
Mm-hmm.
tell you a lot of people play the same way under pressure.
Yeah.
Um, and so it's much more interesting to me to know, um, yeah, what are you going to do under pressure? And most likely they'll be, again, conservative. But
Yeah.
if you see
Yeah.
someone under pressure going down the line, taking risks, you're like, okay, that's something I need to be aware of. Not that in the beginning, I still feel comfortable that I need to play the way that I want to play and take risks myself. But okay, they have the ability to do that. Is something
Mm-hmm.
interesting versus someone that, they might play great in the first three games, but as the match goes on, they start to become more and more conservative. And
Mm-hmm.
then may give you the confidence to say, okay, I can be, and I need to be more active under pressure because they're very likely to be conservative.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Um, so next I want to ask a question about your own doubles game. So rank yourself for the four positions on the court. So server, returner, server's partner, returner's partner. What do you think you're strongest
My
at?
own.
Yeah, for your own game.
Mm, well, serving was the worst.
Okay, so we'll
Because
start at the
I have,
bottom.
yeah.
Okay.
Um, I think that when I was on, I had really great returns.
Okay.
Um, I would say that was maybe on par with when my partner was serving. Like I
Hmm.
had really great returns, but returns don't set up. I mean, returns don't always set up your partner. Um,
Yeah. There's only so
so
much you can do with that, with the
yeah, so
return,
like when
right?
my
Yeah.
partner was serving, I was in a much more collaborative position, right?
Sure.
So I could use them and we were definitely working together. Whereas if I was just and so I would say, as a player, I thought the returns were one of the best parts of my game.
Hmm.
Um, but as a teammate, not necessarily. Um, like they were
Hmm.
still great, but it wasn't necessarily that they would be involved after I returned.
Sure.
Um, yeah, I would say those. What was the fourth one? I missed one.
Returner's partner. It's
Oh,
kind
I
of
see.
yeah,
Yeah, I would say
returner's partner.
that was a yeah, that would probably be my number three, and then returning, and then when my partner was serving,
Yeah.
were probably like the top two. Um, they're just different, so I can't really say which was better. As a player, I had a better return, but as
Hmm.
a teammate, again, just given the fact that you're not getting your partner as involved, and
Hmm.
plus I love to go down the line, and so I wasn't always getting my partner involved while doing that. At the same time, I would let them know. So I actually picked my return before I hit it. Um,
Okay.
and
Interesting.
so
Okay.
I knew I was going down the line. So I tell my partner, I'm going down the line. That means that they're ready to move into the middle after I return. But
Hmm.
it's not necessarily a position like if I don't hit it well, the net person is going to hit it down at their feet. So it's not a strong position for them, but they do know what I'm doing.
Yeah. You returned I watched some footage, I think before our last call. You returned from the deuce court, or did you mix it up through your career?
I mostly played the deuce side actually because my partners at the time did not. I played whatever side my partners didn't want. So I was
Okay.
pretty open to that. Like um I felt I felt confident enough in my game that I wanted my partner to feel confident.
Hmm.
So that's why I ended up playing more due side. But actually, I learned that I like the due side better because when I got pulled out wide on, let's say, a serve or a shot, but mostly on the serve on my forehand, I could slap it down the line.
Mm,
Um, like what you were saying earlier about the backhand, struggling to get it down the line. There's just um, as you're really stretched on the ad side, it's hard to generate a lot of speed with your left hand being outstretched that far.
yeah.
Um, so I enjoyed doing that.
So, when you were returning, let's say on the do side, why did you decide to go down the line so often? And talk a little bit about what's that like, or what that's like telling your partner before the point. So would you like talk to them or signal? Because
Yep.
I've had some people. Oh, is that your dog?
A cat.
Cat. Um, so I've talked to some people who say like, oh, I wait till like I see the type of serve, and then I decide to go down the line, and I tell my partner like, oh, I'm gonna look for it, but I may not go down the line. Whereas it sounds like you decided before they even toss the ball up.
Yeah. So it's not common to do that. I don't know why. Like I did it and I liked doing
Hmm.
that. It didn't matter to me where the person, like, so I would decide, okay, on the forehand side, I'm doing this, and on the backhand side, I'm doing this. Um,
Okay, so you broke it down a little bit. Yeah.
yeah, so I had an intention, and I didn't realize it was not common until I started playing with more partners, and they didn't like that. So it wasn't a problem for me if my partners didn't do that. But I felt like if I knew what I was going to do beforehand, it would be better for my partner to know because the more
Yeah.
information, the better.
Yeah.
And perhaps because I had good returns, or I was, I had like solid returns. I took the ball pretty early, like I wasn't, really waiting and just seeing what they were doing. So, but that was somewhat unique to me. I didn't have many partners that would tell me. Um,
Hmm.
and in terms of going down the line, I taught by Ray actually that to basically make your mark right away for
Hmm.
several reasons. Because one, it's you are more confident in the beginning, like you don't have the pressure as the match goes on. And let's say you're playing cross court the whole time, it's very hard to do something different after you've done something, the
Okay.
same this whole time.
So by
So
make your mark, you mean go down the line early?
like you're basically taking charge of
Oh,
the match. You're telling your opponent, hey, I can do this.
mm,
I will go straight at you. Like I will not be traditional. I will not be conservative or defensive.
hmm.
I will be the one that's going to take charge of this match. And that's a little scary for your opponent because then that puts them in a state of unpredictability for you. Like they don't know where you're going to go. And the
Hmm.
reason why in the beginning is great is because, yeah, one, you get in their head right away. And two, it's so much easier to do it right away. Like whether you miss it or not, coming out and just hitting down the line is easier than 4 games in, 5 games in, you haven't hit down the line yet, and now you're like, should I do it, should I do it now, I don't know, I'm not sure, so there's a lot more doubt that creeps in than doing
Mm.
it right away. But yeah, for me, I liked it because, and it got to the point where all my opponents knew like Vania's going to go down line
Yeah.
on on the first return, on any return that she gets, she's going line. And even if they hit it, um I mean, yeah, this was a Ray thing. He said, look, even if they know you're going down the line, and even if they, and you, whether or not you miss it, or if they know and they put the ball away, like you are still getting into their head
Mm.
unconsciously. Like they will
Yeah.
remember that feeling that, uh-oh, I don't have just the freedom to keep poaching because she did go down the line in the beginning. So there's a seed of doubt that's
Mm.
planted right away.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, and it got to the point also that I just, like, there's other things that I enjoyed about it. One, I could be really aggressive. I could hit like right at them, and
Hmm.
it's very difficult for someone to respond to ball. If I hit it hard enough or low enough, which, you know, I'm flattening out, my returns were flat. So I would, okay, I caveat this, like, um, I would not suggest going down the line if you're going to stay far back and play a topspin shot. You know, like
Right.
if that's the case, then you'd have to hit around them. But I hit a shot that was flat and straight at them, like a body shot.
And took it
Um,
early.
yeah.
Yeah.
And so if someone is volleying, you know, it's much easier for them to poach because they're moving forward. The ball is kind of where they anticipate it to be, and they're hitting it down versus the ball coming at them. And now they have to move backwards to get away, get out of the way of the ball. And it's very
Hmm.
difficult for them to be aggressive with that shot. And even if they are, they kind of have to just push it back deep down the line
Right.
again. There's not a lot of angle for them to work with. So
Right.
um yeah, I just like that was one of my favorite shots. um
So you typically aimed at the person. You weren't going for a winner. You were going like at the net player.
I did.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Okay.
like it's a big target. It's better than go like if I had time, and that's what I said, if you are staying back and you have time, you'd hit around them, then you're trying to hit.
Hmm.
But because I was taking it early, um and also the benefit is that it gives you a bigger margin for error, like
Yeah.
I felt comfortable to just hit straight at them.
Hmm. Okay.
And if
Yeah, that
you're a
makes
little
sense.
off, yeah, if you're a little off, you hit it a little bit towards the middle, but ideally it'd still be low and hard and still a difficult shot for them. And if you're a little off the other way, then you hit it
Right.
past them.
Yeah, I feel like taking away their angles is a big thing. So like even if they do make the volley, if they hit a really good volley, I guess like if it's a backhand volley, they could get it between you and your partner for a winner. But for the most part, I'd imagine they just like play a defensive volley back at you, and then you end up with a short forehand on the next shot, if they even make it at all. So yeah, taking the ball early on that seems like a really good um, return tactic for sure. I wanted to talk about serving. So you served and stayed back, right? You didn't serve and volley too often.
Earlier in my career, like Ray cultivated an all court game. And so I was serving balling quite a bit, actually.
Okay.
Um, all one match that I played in Hertogenbosch, and I played against Jeannie Bouchard, and I serve and volleyed at least 50% of the time, which
Oh
was
wow. Okay.
hard, and it was 3 sets and I won. But no, I was proud of myself because that was a lot of serve volleying, and also I have to be very accurate with my serve when I serve and volley because I'm little. But as I got older, so later in my career, like the last 5 years of my career, I rarely serve and volleyed.
Yeah. Okay.
I did, might be on the ad side, um, you know, either on a second serve or if I didn't feel comfortable rallying from the baseline.
Hmm.
And that was the side that I felt a little less comfortable with. I liked being on the forehand side. Then I
Hmm.
might follow against a while.
Okay. Is there so how did you handle a team that would it was like really aggressive at the net? So let's say you're serving and staying back, and they like to return and volley. Like I'm thinking of like Gabby Dabrowski or Demi Sure, some of those players who like to return and volley. Even Siniakova does it some. How do you handle that strategically?
Um, so I felt I had, I would say, good enough returns that I could get it at their feet.
Hmm.
Uh, so like let's say they're serving balling. If they're return and balling, it's a little more well, it was a little more difficult for me because I had a weaker serve, so that it was actually a better position for them.
Hmm.
And I'd be put under pressure. Um, so there's a couple of ways to combat that. So if I didn't feel like I could, let's say they were returning and coming to the net and they were getting too close and I was being put under too much pressure. So playing cross court was not a safe shot because let's say the returner's partner is probably going to be very aggressive because my serve is weak and they're going to be really close to the net. And so going through the middle or going cross was not safe because
Hmm.
they close to the net. So if I
Sure.
couldn't on the line, then I would try to lob. And if your lob was good enough, like it pushes them back, if you get it, within 5 feet from the baseline, it should be enough to push them back. But
Hmm.
it's not almost like bashing the ball at you, on the baseline, and you're trying to defend with two people coming at face. Having my partner stay back. Oh no, that's sorry, when I'm serving. So actually, I mean, serve and volleying is an option. So you're moving before they move.
Hmm.
So, they're likely to try to hit deep. If they're coming in, they're going to try to hit deep. So then I might serve and volley. I formation, actually, what we did the most was formations, but that means you have to
Okay.
get,
Yeah.
so first, really important, first serves and spots were really important in doubles.
Yeah.
So if I could do an I formation, then they wouldn't be as aggressive because they don't know where we're going, right? So
Hmm.
they probably wouldn't return and come in if they don't know where my partner's going. So if I was able to do I formation, and I preferred I over Australian because Australian was harder to poach. So usually it was easier to just stay on that side, but it's hard to really run across. And the better you go, the better you get, the girls could really hit their spots well.
Sure.
Um, Mixing up different like speeds and heights of the serve helped too, to kind of like throw off their timing of the return.
Okay.
Uh, yeah, I mean, there's quite a few things that you could try. I guess the most important thing is that you're trying different things. So for me, it was,
Mm.
probably trying variations, I formation to start with. And if things didn't work, then you'd keep trying. Or I tell my partner, girl, you got to kamikaze, you have to poach,
Yeah.
and we're like, you got to sacrifice yourself for me because I'm being put under too much pressure. So
Yeah.
yeah, there's a lot of things that you might consider. You may not be able to execute them, but in the match, you just got to keep trying. Got to keep trying
Yeah.
different things. Don't get beat by
For
the same.
right, exactly. For the serve and volley in that scenario, are you taking that first volley cross court since you're moving forward and taking it early, or is that still not a safe shot?
Not necessarily. I'd say, depending on how aggressive that net person
Hmm.
uh, is also a good play, especially if you've got a ball that's, kind of at, your waist to chest level, like a pretty
Hmm.
solid, your opponent was hitting deep. Um, so I'd say, yeah, that is dependent on the net person and where they're
Okay.
at. Like, check them, you can play line, and it's again like when you're playing at someone, they're in now a defensive position, they're in a reactive position versus a proactive aggressive position. So
Sure.
uh yeah, it just depends.
Okay, so I know you got to run. Last couple of questions for you. Um, what was your favorite play to run? So this could be serving, returning, and what I mean by that, I'll just give you an example of one of my favorite plays. I don't know if you call it a play to run because you're not actually calling it before the point, but I love when my opponent's serving and volleying, and my partner puts a return down at their feet, and I'm able to poach as the returner's partner and just hit it like right through the middle of them. Is there a particular play or type of point that you loved to win on the doubles court?
um I liked winning them all. I mean, it was very, I loved doing I formation. So
Okay.
I loved like picking right, knowing what my opponent was doing.
Hmm.
Uh, I loved like when the opponent went down the line at me, and I liked going. So I typically would not go through the middle because that's where people think you're gonna go, and I try to hit kind of down the line into the alley, and
Hmm.
then usually the opponent would then go cross court. So most of the time, like a player won't go down the line two times in a row.
Right.
Um, so I really liked your. It's basically like outsmarting your opponent, like knowing where they're going to go. So they went down the line, you guessed right, you went back down the line, and then you poached after, and they went cross court. And
And then you end the
I really
point.
enjoyed that because like your opponent's head goes down. It's like it's
Yeah.
demoralizing. Like same thing. If someone did that to me, I'm like, dang it, they read me like 2 or 3 times in a row.
Yeah.
That's rough. So it was nice to be so in tune with the match that I knew exactly what they were doing.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a really good answer. I love that feeling too when you time that poach perfect and read them. Um, what is your favorite? I don't know. We asked this last time. What's your favorite tennis book?
I don't think I've ever read a full tennis book. I'm sorry.
Really?
So that one, yeah.
What's your favorite non-tennis book?
Oh gosh, that's tough. I
Or you can just name a
two,
recent one that you've enjoyed, whatever.
I mean, two of my
Yeah.
favorite authors. One is Neil Gaiman, so he
Yeah.
does urban fantasy, and then Octavia Butler. I enjoy fantasy kind of sci-fi
Okay.
novels.
Cool. What was your favorite tournament? Or what is your favorite tournament?
I Indian Wells, Australian Open, like any of the tournaments in Australia, I loved.
Mhm. Yeah.
Yeah.
Um, Last time we covered how to make doubles more popular. So I think that's all I have for you today, Vanya. Thank
Okay.
you again for coming on. That was a really fun strategy episode. I think people are going to take away a lot from this. So thank you.
Good. Yeah. Hopefully it wasn't too technical.
No, it was perfect. Really appreciate it. If you want to become a smarter doubles player and start winning more matches, then join the Tennis Tribe Doubles Strategy newsletter. Every single Thursday, I'll send you a new doubles tip or tactic that you can use in your very next match. And when you join, you're going to get a free guide on how to play with more confidence and start dominating at the net in doubles. My name's Will. I'm the founder of the Tennis Tribe, and over the last 5 years, I've worked with players at every level of the game, from USTA 3.0 players all the way to Division I college programs, as well as some of the top 10 doubles players in the world. And on Thursdays, with this strategy newsletter, I share that knowledge and advice that I've gained over the years with you. So to sign up, you can go to thetennistribe.com. And again, you'll get that free net play guide when you join.